Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Bruni Brocast. I'm here joined by the wonderful, you can introduce yourself.
Adam Bruni.
Adam Bruni, the one and only, hopefully. And then obviously myself, Stephen. And together, we're the Bruni brothers. And we're here to talk about today, why is philosophy important? And so Adam and I happen to have similar stories about how we first kind of came, extremely similar stories as to how we first kind of came into philosophy in our lives and like why it meant so much to us, and also kind of the thinkers that we were exposed to at young ages that kind of drove our journey in philosophy into the future. I mean, Adam himself he studies philosophy at university. That's his thing. So I think just to give a quick breakdown of what you're going to find in today's episode, we're going to talk about our upbringing and why philosophy was important to us and how we realized that. And then we're going to discuss some of the frameworks that we think are integral to our own lives. And hopefully you can find some kind of substance in it for yourself to apply to your own life. And that'll be it. I think we have some quotes we want to break down, and we're going to talk about stoicism.
It's going to be a fun conversation.
So
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's start from the very beginning.
Alrighty.
Adam and I are Italian, so we were raised in a pretty by the book Roman Catholic family, right? Like, we went to church a lot. Our grandmother brought us to church all the time.
Lots of hard pressed religious values, kind of baked into us from a very young age, and
yeah. But like, so okay. So for like religion for you, when you know what? For the sake of the episode, we're just going to call her Nonna, because that's what we call her. She's our grandmother. She's our Nonna. When Nonna brought you to church, did you not like that? Because I remember you weren't a big fan.
Yeah, but I'm not sure which kid does like church. But yeah. I wasn't fond of it, to say the least.
Because I think around like 14 years old, I think we stopped. I'm pretty sure we stopped around 14.
Yeah, I think maybe a bit younger, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I kept going a little longer than you did.
Yeah, maybe you did. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't want to.
So we both were raised in this Roman Catholic family. Theology was important. The Bible was important. You know, the Ten Commandments.
Very
obviously
dogmatic.
Extremely dogmatic. But that's a good thing. Wouldn't you argue that's a good thing?
Sorry?
Wouldn't you argue that's a good thing, though? Having dogma.
I think that's debatable. I think we could talk about that for like 3 hours, but I think baseline, probably it's probably a decent thing. At least you grew up with some kind of very like easy to see moral compass, which is good. But also you have to deal with the fact that you have a lot of beliefs, and not a lot of them can be proved easily. So you have to kind of deal with that at a very young age, because you take these things to be true, and then you learn more about what the world's actually about, and you learn, like, the Bible isn't exactly correct. And you're like, okay, well, why is that? And stuff like that. You start asking questions, and then you realize that not a lot of this stuff's concrete, and it's kind of...
Yeah, but isn't it good to have a baseline that we're all kind of on the same page? Like, listen, these are like, the Bible tells us what's good and bad.
There's a non-dogmatic baseline that you could have, right?
What would establish a non-dogmatic baseline?
Moral principles and
biological moral principles.
Yeah, it's definitely more of like a gray area than the solid black and white that is Catholicism or Christianity in general. Like, that's the one good thing about it, right? You're brought up with the very solid black and white, right and wrong kind of thinking, because that is a lot of what religion's kind of about, right?
I think so. This is how I see religion in my own experience with it. Is I think the black and white, when you're that young, like we're talking like 5, 6, 7 years old, where you're just starting to really understand like language, and you can kind of piece together what people are saying in sentences. When you get to that age, I think it's good to have things in black and white. I think it's good not to overwhelm the brain with all these questions. I think it's good to say, listen, killing is bad, stealing is bad. These are the commandments. Listen, this is a story of someone that you need to follow, Jesus Christ. His story shows perseverance, it shows forgiveness, it shows mercy, and it shows unbridled love for everyone at all times. So this is a story that we want you to learn, and we want you to be more like Jesus. And when you want to do something bad, what would Jesus do? It's this kind of black and white, and it really helps you as a young mind formulate kind of your own thoughts about the world around you, and then also how you fit in and how you're going to interact with the world around you. And that's why I think dogmatic beliefs are important at a young age, because it's good to have that black and white before a kid can get so bogged down by questions.
But you could argue that there are those same principles, like don't kill, don't steal, that you can teach in a non-dogmatic kind of way, right? It does help to have the story of Jesus Christ to go along with it.
I think the story is important.
Of that goes with any other religion.
Yes.
Not that Christianity is more important than any of the other ones. It's
no,
we happen to.
They all have a story or origin of some kind of, it just happens to be.
And that does help, I think, but I think it is definitely possible to do without that.
Oh, I'm not saying that it's not. I do think it's possible to do without it, but I think what you're saying is like what the government has to now take charge and to tell babies and like parents what the morals are, or are you just saying that the parents can do it without needing
the parents, just the children? Yes,
the children can figure it out by themselves.
No, they have to get taught by the teachers.
So you want to leave that to the government then through teachers?
I think that's obviously not just to the teachers, but if the parents don't, teach their kids about stuff like that, then at least the government will have that kind of fallback, right? Where they will be teaching it also. But yeah, I'm sure mostly parents teach it. I'm sure that's the case, yeah. But
you're also coming from a position where you assume that the government has, all of our best interests in mind, and also the best interests.
But a lot of our interests align, right? Like,
of course,
not killing people, that aligns.
Yeah, it does. That's one that definitely aligns. But then the government. Right? But okay,
not
so now
lying, right? It also aligns with them. Most of them align, if you think about it.
But you're thinking about like not lying, don't steal, don't murder. All those align with kind of like what we were brought up to think. But also remember, one of the most important lessons I took from religion as a young person was the story about Moses and the false gods. Thou shalt not worship false gods before me, right?
Really?
And yeah, that's like one of the
interesting story for me too. Yeah,
very interesting story, because
I thought about that one a lot. Yeah,
I was questioning myself. I was like, why would these people worship a golden cow? Like, why did they do it?
I had that same question.
Why?
Factually the same. I'm not just saying that to agree with you. I literally thought the same thing, and it didn't make any sense growing up. It literally made zero sense to me growing up.
But now it makes sense. It's not about the golden cow. It's the idea of something else, right? Something else can promise you the world, but if you give into it, you're turning your back on God, right?
The problem is that's a bit hypocritical too, if you think about it, right?
Yeah, because what if God is something that's turning you away from something else?
God was the false cat, right?
Yeah, what if our God is the false?
It has in mind the fact that, this God is the correct God, right?
I think you have to operate off of that assumption now.
Like you have to. It operates on that axis that God is real, and if you worship something else, then you're sinning.
Okay, but hold the phone.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, though.
Of course.
I'm just saying that's the way it is.
But the God that we're worshiping in, right, let's say, this God is one that tells us to love each other no matter what, and to not hurt each other, and to take care of each other. Like, this God, if he truly is the real God, is a pretty good guy, let's say.
He tells you not to eat shelled fish.
I don't know why he tells us that. Maybe there's toxins in it or something.
Pigs. Hates pigs.
I don't know. See that? I mean, God can sit out on that one. I like sausage.
Those were
it was health. It was health stuff.
Exactly.
So now let's fast forward. So we were young. Sure. We were Catholics. We went to church, and then there came a point where we stopped. And I think that was around the 14, 15 mark, maybe earlier for you. And I think definitely at that point in our lives, we started to question the church. I think it was after I got confirmed. And I was like, okay, I'm confirmed now in the Roman Catholic Church, but like, do I really believe this? Or is it just that I kind of always had to believe it and I never really thought otherwise?
Yeah, for me, it was before the confirmation, like right before, a couple months before. Yeah. I really started thinking about, because to me, being confirmed was like a big deal where I had to be sure that it was what I wanted. And I thought about it for a long time.
Because you've always been very rational.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I
you were
always
like,
thought way too much.
if you were you're the kind of person that like, if someone told you like you have to like lock into this for the rest of your life, you would like take a
wait a
week.
second.
You take a week to think about
even from a young age.
it. Yeah, you'd be like,
Sorry?
hold the phone.
Yeah, wait just a second about this. Yeah,
So
so I had to think about it for a while, and I couldn't come to a good conclusion, and I just ended up doing it because there's a lot of pressure on me, and I don't think it was the wrong decision, but
I think it was
I definitely
perhaps a cultural decision for you.
exactly yeah.
Yeah, like a familial decision. There was like not really a choice. For
Yeah,
me, I
and
was
you know what? I have a lot to attribute to the Catholic Church. So, like for example, like my morality and the
yeah.
way I was taught from a young age, I think was something that's definitely positive. So, if I can,
Okay.
like, sort of give back by getting confirmed, that's the way I thought about it. I think, but yeah.
So we both got confirmed. You're 2 years younger than me, just for everyone who's listening. And then so we both got confirmed. For me, I started questioning things after because I was kind of like the kind of person to just do things and then think about the consequences later. That's kind of like how I've run through life. And Adam's very much the kind of person that like sees something in the future and wants to think for a year about how to tackle that problem. Like he's very much like he sees things way in the future and he likes to just take his time and evaluate his options. But for me, after I was confirmed, I started questioning myself, like, why is this the right way? Why? And that was really, and we talked about it a second ago, but like really the question was like, why is my God more right than other people's gods? Like, how does that make any sense? How do I rectify the fact that there are so many people in the world that are Muslim and so many people in the world that are Jewish and Buddhist and what have you, and other religions as well, right? Like any religion. And how does God fit in with the rest of them? Does he? Are they all the same God? Are we just perceiving a force differently? Like, are we like taking culture to perceive a force in a different light? Because that might be what it is.
There are so many different questions you can ask yourself.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I actually learned this like this week. I learned something. Well, I didn't learn it. It's not necessarily like a set in stone objective idea, but Kant has an argument where he says that these questions that we ask, they seem like they can be answerable, but they're not necessarily rational questions that can have answers. Like, how are we supposed to know what could be the case outside of itself, right? Like, like outside of the universe, how are we supposed to know, like, who created it, when it was created, if it's been going infinitely? Like, how are we supposed to, like, come to terms with these questions? Like, everyone always assumes that the universe has a starting point and an ending point, but that's also just conjecture, right? If you think about it.
It doesn't have to. Why does it have to?
Why does it have to, right?
Yeah.
So what Kant thinks is that these rational faculties that we have to turn these thoughts that we think are objective and rational, and we have to understand them for what they are. In reality, they're just things that we think about. We think about our own creation. We think about the start of the universe and the end of the universe. But in reality, we can use this rationality for more of a subjective purpose rather than an objective purpose.
Okay, so elaborate on that.
So what I mean by that is we can use them to describe the world that we see around us rather than trying to describe things that we cannot possibly know.
Okay.
And I don't really have an example of how we could use that kind of thinking to be helpful to us in the empirical world, but I think that is definitely possible. And I think he's right that we can't really answer these questions, right?
Well, it's like the unmoved mover, right? Like it's one of those kinds of questions.
And he even mentions that. He mentions the unmoved mover too. I'm pretty sure he mentions it. And the thing is that like
we should explain to our audience what the unmoved mover is.
The unmoved mover is the fact that every single particle is in motion, and wouldn't there have to be something that would cause the motion in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Something that was not moved, but is moving, right?
Yeah, something that is not moving, but that moved, actually, I think is the right way to say it. Like
particles are in motion, and
yes,
all particles can cause other particles to be in motion too.
Well, that's how it's a chain reaction.
Some particle that was in motion before motion
existed.
Yeah, I
guess. Like, well, if you think like so like if you have like
it's the
second particle is in motion, and the second particle being in motion caused the third and the fourth and infinity beyond that, right? Mm-hmm. But how did the second particle start in getting into motion? What made it get into motion, right? Mm-hmm. And is the answer a first particle? But then if there is a first particle, did it exist in motion, or did it was it static? Like, what is that?
So much better way of explaining it than I.
What is that first particle, and what did it do to set off a chain reaction that has now existed for infinity since then? Right?
It was somehow unmoved while also being a mover. That's why this problem is called the problem of the.
And who started? Was that Aristotle or Plato?
I think that's Aristotle.
Okay, so
don't quote me on that.
Don't quote us. It's one of the. It's definitely one of the two. But
I hope it is. If it's not, I'll feel dumb. But yeah,
the idea.
We'll assume it is.
The idea of the unmoved mover is I think it's one of the earliest explanations for why a God force should exist. Right? It's like a God force is this force that put the rest into motion. Right? The force that started the whole kind of thing, and that's one of the early ideas of what God is this kind of unmoved mover. So let's keep moving then. So then we got confirmed. Let's keep moving. So we got confirmed. We started questioning our faith, and then me first, obviously, I hit grade 12, and in grade 12 I was offered a choice: take the blue pill or take the red pill.
Yep.
So no. So I was offered a choice, and the choice was whether to take grade 12 religion, because Adam and I went to Catholic high school in Canada and in Ontario. So the question was whether I would take grade 12 religion, which apparently was a bird course. Apparently it was the easiest course.
I did hear it was a bird course.
Yeah. Or take philosophy. And philosophy apparently was a difficult course, but what my friends in higher years had told me was that it was really, really interesting. And one of the teachers for our philosophy was kind of like this. He was a character. Let's just call him a character. So we'll call him the Hoff. Let's call him the Hoff from here on in. We'll call him the Hoff because his last name had to do with Hoff. Hoffman.
Yeah, some of the.
You know what? If this gets to him, I don't even care, because we only have nice things to say.
I bet you'd like that. I bet you'd like having Hoffman.
Dude, if we could have Hoffman in this call, I would shut up for an hour.
Adam, you wouldn't.
No, dude, Adam, you know me. I never shut up. If Hoffman was in the call, I'd probably shut up for an hour and listen to him.
One of your strengths. Not shutting up.
Not shutting up. So I started. He was a teacher that we had. I had him first in grade 12, and Hoffman kind of opened my eyes a lot to a lot of different things. He, to put it politely, I think he was a little bit anti-establishment, kind of rogue. If I could explain him, I'd say that he was a rogue teacher. He was pretty anti-establishment, and I don't even think he followed the curriculum, if I'll be completely honest, because he taught us about philosophers that were so crazy and out of this world. You're going to say something.
Let's assume that he did follow the curriculum, please. Let's
not get
anyone in trouble.
All right, let's assume that he followed the curriculum. He taught us some crazy philosophers. So I started with Hoffman's class, and basically the start of his class, he explains that there are how many fallacies, Adam?
I don't remember. 12.
I thought 12.
The exact number. I know all of them, but
he teaches his students all the fallacies, which is basically listen, if you are engaged in a debate and someone says something that you think is wrong, if it is wrong, it's wrong for one or more of 12 reasons. That's why it's wrong. There isn't I don't think you can be wrong outside of that.
For some number of reasons.
Yeah, for some number of reasons. So then he teaches you all the different fallacies. So Adam, give me a couple of fallacies that mean a lot to you. Let's just explain them.
Ad hoc.
Okay, so what's a post hoc and an ad hoc?
They're both the same thing. I forget what the more casual name for it is.
Okay.
But the post hoc ergo propter hoc, just because something happens after something else doesn't mean that it was caused by it, right? That's a very important one, I think.
So let's have an example.
It's hard to think of an example on the spot, honestly.
Adam banged the table, and the glass fell over. Now, if I were to say that Adam's banging of the table caused the glass to fall over, and that was the only evidence that I had, would it be an ad hoc? Right?
Maybe. Also, I think the example was do ice cream sales going up cause shark attacks? Cause an increase in shark attacks? I'm pretty sure that's the example that he used.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Because you look at the stats and you see, oh, after this huge upping of ice cream sales, there happens to be like so many more shark attacks than normal. And you would wonder why that would be the case, right?
Sharks can taste
and
it.
You can argue that, because the shark attacks are increasing after the popularity of ice cream is increasing, they must cause each other. Yeah. But in reality, it's just because it's like
summertime.
And it's summertime. That's the answer, right? So
people are on the beach in summertime, and people are having ice cream in summertime.
Yeah.
That's a good example. So there are many fallacies. There are so many of them. Go ahead and Google them, because I'll be honest with you, and this is like complete honesty. I'm a law student. I use these like all the time. I couldn't tell you all the different fallacies.
You use them all the time?
Dude, like when I was in court in Detroit, all the time, like arguing with prosecutors.
Say, like, that's a fallacy, or did you say,
no, I wasn't that overbearing. I wasn't like, you're making a fallacy, good sir. Objection. No,
just say, like, that doesn't make sense because of this.
No, I would say, like, listen, like you have a flaw somewhere in your logic, because this doesn't have to be this, or like I would just point out the flaw and be like, that's flawed logic, and this is why I think your logic is flawed, and because your logic is flawed, this is what I think you should do for my client instead, right? Like that's kind of how I phrased it.
That's assertive.
Dude, you know me.
Yeah.
So
there's actually much more online than we even learned. There's like, I think there's like 20 or 30. We only got taught a certain set of them.
I think 12.
You can look them up. I'm pretty sure there's a good site that says that like has them all, and the site's very pretty. I'm pretty sure that exists. The fallacies.
So
I don't know,
but basically, to use these, it's very important. If you ever want to debate someone, or just even in conversation, if you're trying to be a critical thinker, and
the truth.
Exactly. One of the things about philosophy is like a sifter. Like you're trying to like you have a whole mound of dirt.
I like that idea.
And someone tells you, in this dirt, in this massive mound of dirt, there is gold. I promise you, there is gold. I just can't tell you where it is. So now you have this pan, and you've got to sift around that dirt and mix it around until all you have left is the gold nuggets, right? And that's what you want to bring out of a conversation. You want, like, whenever you enter a conversation with someone, it's like, okay, you have to understand that conversations are like a mound of dirt, because not everything is super clear when people talk. Not everyone is perfect at talking to each other. So conversations are this kind of mound of dirt. And the more you ask questions and the more you're kind of aware of the conversation that you're having, the better you are at sifting around that dirt to find the gold nuggets, to either figure out what someone's thinking or feeling, or to figure out how you think about the situation, or what you think is true about the situation, right? But it's always a game of sifting through and trying to find the nuggets. And fallacies are kind of one of these tools that you can use to help sift it out. Because if someone's telling you garbage, you can, and you know the fallacies, you can use the fallacies to get the garbage out.
Because if you don't know them, you'll kind of be like sitting there like, I feel like there's something wrong about this, but I don't know what. And then you might end up taking it as fact when it's obviously not. And then once you know them all, it's like pretty easy to be like, oh, that's this is that, this is that. Well, it's kind of crazy once you start. It's kind of crazy what you'll find.
Your example with the sharks and the ice cream is a very benign. It's a good example, but it's very benign, right? Like if someone were to believe that ice cream sales were linked to shark attacks, it wouldn't cause, mass detriments to the world stage. It wouldn't cause mass hunger. It wouldn't ruin the world, right? But that same type of thinking that leads someone to believe that sharks and ice cream are linked could lead them to believe something else that's far more sinister. And that's, I think, one of the grains of truth that we got from Hoffman, was that it's good to approach conversations critically, and it's good to know these fallacies to try and sift out the garbage, so that you can keep yourself from falling into these pits of like fallacy driven thought, and you can kind of be critical, and you can try and get the truth, because philosophy is really always about getting the truth. So we learned the fallacies, and then we went into some even crazier stuff, because philosophy really starts with the Greeks. For what we know, right?
100%. That's the baseline that you have to know. And lots of people probably know them, or have heard of them, or have heard of some of the things that they've talked about. Lots of important stuff there.
We have some quotes, I think, but not from any Greeks. But I think the most important lesson I got from the Greek philosophers, and this is personal, was the cave allegory. That was
that's a good one. That's
that
really
like
good. Yeah.
literally, if my eyes were closed before, the cave allegory was like, holy shit. I was like, oh my god.
It's the start of like the whole Matrix idea, right? That's
It
pretty
is
much
the
what
start
the
of
cave
it.
allegory is.
It's
If
this.
anyone, I'm sure most of you know what the Matrix is, and the whole idea that you could be, in a cave, right? Wasn't that the idea?
So I'll explain the idea. So the idea of the cave allegory is this: you wake up. You wake up. You have no recollection of anything. You don't know a thing. All you know is you're sitting in a cave, you're chained up, and you're staring at a wall of the cave. You don't see anything else. You can't move your head. You're sitting, you can't move, and you're staring at a wall in the cave. There's a fire behind you.
I remember this now.
There's a fire. Yeah, there's a fire behind you.
But you can't see it because you look at the wall.
You can't see the fire. It's behind you. You're looking at the wall. All you can see from the fire are reflections of shadows moving around, obviously behind you. Who knows? But all you can see from the fire are the reflections of the light on the cave wall in front of you. This is your life forever. Every single day, you wake up, you stare at the wall, and you go to sleep. That's the only thing that you know. Okay, and then what happens, Adam?
And then one of your people who you're sitting with breaks out, right?
Yeah, okay. One of the people
outside.
Yes, or you yourself. I think the allegory was that Socrates.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
Socrates was the person who broke out. So
you're right.
So while he's sitting there in silence, watching the fire against the wall and the shadows and the light, he thought to himself, is there anything more to this? Is this all that there is, truly? Is there anything more? And so he struggled, and he got out, and no one stopped him. And he left the cave, and he looked around, and he saw the world. He saw the forest, he saw animals, he saw, insects, everything. He saw the world. And people, well, everything. He saw everything, okay?
Every aspect of the real world.
And he thought to himself, the first thing he thought to himself was, my friends in the cave are being held captive. We were all being held captive by some force, we don't know what, and they locked us up in this cave, and they didn't want us to see the outside. Obviously, they did not want us to see the outside because they locked us up and they made us face the wall, and all we could see was the fire and the lights of the fire and the shadows. So Socrates, after seeing the world around him, decides the only thing that I have left to do in my life is to be able to help my friends experience the real world. So he decides to go back into the cave. He was in the cave. He saw the shadows. He left the cave. He saw the world in all of its beauty. And the only thing he wanted to do was go back so that he could free his friends and his brothers and his sisters so that they could also enjoy the real world with him. So when he went back to the cave, he sat down and he explained to them, listen, whatever you're seeing in front of you is not what reality truly is. We're locked in here. These are shadows. This is not real. Like these images that we're seeing from the shadows are things that we're kind of making up ourselves, or things that the fire is feeding to us, but it's not real. Like this is not what reality is. Reality is outside. Guys, I saw the forest and I saw animals and I can help you guys get out. And what do the people say?
They call him crazy.
They say he's crazy.
They say there's nothing outside.
There's nothing. There's nothing but the wall. You're crazy. There's nothing but the wall. And either you come and sit down with us and watch the wall, or leave and don't come back, because we don't want to hear what you have to say anymore, you crazy person. This at first opened my eyes. Yeah, the idea of what?
And the idea was that person was Socrates, right?
Mm-hmm. And he made an academy.
Of Socrates, and this is Plato's idea. Plato being Socrates' student.
Yeah.
Right, and this was all Plato's idea to create this cave allegory.
Yeah.
And the idea is that Socrates tried to free all of Athens, but Athens ended up killing him by finding him guilty of corrupting the minds of the youth.
Yeah,
right?
he corrupted their minds. So and the
poison
allegory is so important because it literally is, it's a parable or a story about the real life that Socrates did actually lead. Socrates existed in Athens. He saw the problems with the Athenian system. He saw through the veil. His vision pierced the veil of politics, of culture, of inherent bias. He saw through everything. And he said, if we want this world to be the best that it can be, we need everyone to see what I see. Everyone needs to be able to pierce through the veil.
Everybody needs to exit.
Everyone needs to leave the cave so that we can all live in with reason and philosophy and rationality. And so he operates in Athens. He runs an academy. He has a number of students. A lot of them are young. A lot of them are impressionable. And he gets charged with corrupting youth, and he ends up killing himself. Yes, he does.
He doesn't kill himself. He gets poisoned.
No, he willingly takes it, though. He willingly takes it.
Well, he could have gotten out, and
he could have left.
He could have fled to nearby,
another Greek
cities, but there's civilizations.
Yeah, like a nearby Greek city.
The reason why he didn't want to do it is because apparently he thought that he only saw his life through Athens.
Yeah.
Because if you think about Athens, the idea of Athens was just a circle of, it was a city that was a circle, right? Everything outside of the circle of Athens was pretty close to barbarianism.
Yeah.
It's pretty close just to barbaric civilizations.
Yeah.
Right?
At the time, Athens was incredibly advanced.
This is a lot. This is like 6,000. What? I don't want to say 6,000 BC.
It's got to be 2,000 BC. No, it's got to be 2,000 or 3,000 BC.
Okay, sorry, something like that.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
A few thousand BC. Like, this is very old. And he knew that the outside cities or civilizations were like barbaric, so he didn't want to live there. He had only lived in Athens. He didn't know how to live in those types of societies. He only knew how to rule in a type of society where a philosopher can be of influence.
Can exist, because in these other societies
not exist yet. If the civilization does not have room for the philosopher yet, because it's like not aged enough to have room for it yet, then what's he gonna do there? Nobody's gonna like him. He's not gonna be able to talk to anybody. His whole life is essentially gonna be gone anyways.
Yeah.
So he wanted to make a point, or the idea is he wanted to make a point of his life in Athens by being poisoned by his people in Athens.
Right? The way that I understood the story was that he was locked up. His followers actually broke him out of jail, and then they said, you can flee to a nearby city and you can live your life still.
You don't want to go.
He said, no, my life is in Athens. And then the police were coming, and he was faced with a choice: leave, get caught by the police and probably put to death, or be a hero and take your own way out. And so he took the hemlock. He drank the poison, and he killed himself. I understand that he killed himself.
Okay, that's possible. Yeah, I'm not.
Regardless of that, the Socrates.
We have two different accounts. I'm pretty sure there's an account by Plato, and then there's like an account by somebody else too.
Whatever. What actually really matters is the cave allegory. Is this allegory? Is that, listen, what you see on the daily doesn't necessarily facilitate everything that is reality. It doesn't have to. You could be looking at the fire on the wall. You really could. All of us could. Me, Adam, any of us could be staring at the fire on the wall. And all that it takes is the willingness and the critical thinking to just say, what if there is something more? What if there is something that I haven't seen yet?
You try and see past it.
What if what's in front of me isn't completely real? Then what is? And so what Socrates is trying to teach us is that it's good to question. It's good to question everything, even the things that you think are integral to your own reality. You should question that too, because there should be nothing that you don't you should question everything, including your own existence, including your own reality, because that's how you come to good answers. So.
Yeah.
Moving on from that, the Greeks were very, very important in philosophy for a number of reasons. I think for me, the most important thing was his cave allegory. And then from there, it comes into, if you want to talk about some, do you have some Greek stuff you want to talk about?
No, I think that was one of the most important things that I learned in that course too. Yeah, for sure. I think it was very important.
So we move past the Greeks.
Yeah, move past the Who's
and
passing?
we arrive at the Romans.
Oh, Romans, yeah. I was gonna skip over them. Yeah,
you're gonna skip over the Romans?
Like by accident, I just forgot.
Oh,
but yeah,
well,
it's very important.
If we're gonna do this chronologically, we have to start from the beginning and work our way through. So at first, and this is literally how we taught the course. You start philosophy at the start of philosophy. Socrates, I mean, maybe other people won't consider him the start of philosophy.
Yeah, there were some before him.
There were some before him, but I mean, like for a lot of people,
very cool ones. I learned some really cool about some really cool guys.
Have you read the Gilgamesh story?
No, but I should read that.
Yeah, you got to. Apparently, it's a lot like the Judeo-Christian stories as well. Like apparently, they all share a lot of the same like story plot devices. It's really interesting. But so anyway, Socrates is one of the very first philosophers, if not the first major one. He's one of the very first ones, and he's one of the most important. However, you don't read Socrates. You have to read him from Plato. Socrates did not write anything down, at least to our knowledge, but an account of his entire life is found through Plato's works. Much like, if you're Christian, much like the Bible is an account of Jesus's life, but through his disciples and his followers, right? Like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yep.
So the Socratic story is through Plato.
Wait. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Wait, but weren't those not his disciples though?
Not all of them were his disciples. But you could still consider them his disciples. They weren't one of the 12 disciples in the story.
Who wrote the books under the names were not okay. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. But
regardless, the Gospels are written in a similar format where it's like it's an account of this great leader, but it's from someone learning from him, and their account of his life from learning from this person. It's a similar kind of story. But then you move from Greeks into Romans, and Romans were heavily influenced by Greeks, and you can tell by their philosophy, by their dress. They loved the ancient classical Greeks. They loved them. They adored them. They revered them. And so, what the Romans had, if the Greeks had sophism, which we're not even going to get into, but if they had something called sophism. The Roman,
just the art of arguing. That's pretty much an easy way to put it.
Yeah, it's how to argue really, really well and to make people feel dumb. I guess I don't really know. The Sophists in Greece were some of the first groups of philosophers, and they actually were like lawyers. They operated as lawyers, basically. Pretty close, right? They were like advocates. They operated like advocates for people
they were in town. Parties, they were lawyers.
Yeah, they were advocates.
Yes.
So then you move into the Romans with the Stoics. And so Adam, you have a lot of you have some quotes here for Stoicism and some ideas. Let's hear what you have to say. If you could give an introduction to Stoicism, what would you?
How would I introduce Stoicism?
Life is a play. That's one of the first major rules.
It's also that life will be suffering to an extent, right?
Life is suffering.
And the big question with Stoicism is not. Like, it's not questioning the fact that life is going to be suffering sometimes or a lot of the times, depending on who you are and what your life is like. But the question is, what do you do about that? What do you make of it? That's the question that Stoicism is trying to answer. And the answer that they come to is that, okay, life can be a lot of suffering, but we can create ways of dealing with it, and we can live with it and just try to be our best selves, like, despite it. That's probably the quickest way I would describe Stoicism.
So life is suffering, but through suffering, we can still find enjoyment.
We can find a way to live that will be us being our best selves despite the suffering.
Suffering doesn't preclude you from being your best self. Suffering is integral.
It's easy to think that, like, if your life is all suffering, like, what's the point, right? That's what Stoicism is trying to answer. Be the best person that you can be. Be the best actor that you can be in the play, even if your role is small or your role is, death on the battlefield in a Roman play. If you're a Roman soldier and you have to be on the front lines, there's no running away from it. You have to face it and try and be the best frontline soldier you can be, right?
And that's, I think, one of the biggest things in Stoicism speaks like personally to me, and I know that Adam is also he also thinks that it speaks to him as well, and perhaps it's because we're Italian and we kind of have like that ancestral line and the
Probably
kind of
not,
like the
but
cultural no, but like the cultural, I don't know, who knows, whatever.
Yeah, I like the cultural idea of it, the fact that like it's the ideas of my people
Of my people. Yeah, it's kind of cool. But regardless, I think the most important thing for Stoicism for me was the idea that life is a play, right? So when you think of life being a play and you're an actor in the play, you have a part, right? Like in a movie, there are extras, there are main characters. Life in the world around us is like this grand play that has existed for thousands of years with hundreds of billions of actors and actresses or what have you, right? But despite that, each of us has had a part to play. Each of us has. No matter how small, we've all been given the chance to have a part to play. Whether we lock ourselves in our rooms all day and play video games, or we, rule the world because we become a politician or whatever, like each of us has a part. We're given the chance to have a part. But through every single part is suffering. Suffering exists in every single person in a myriad of ways. Suffering is not the same amongst all of us, but all of us suffer different things. If you're rich, you suffer from some kind of problem that, maybe a poor person doesn't suffer from. But if you're poor, you suffer from a problem that maybe a rich person doesn't suffer from. But suffering occurs unilaterally. No one is precluded from suffering.
Nobody escapes it, right?
Nobody can escape suffering. Even and this is the thing that it's like the rich person is suffering and the poor person is suffering and everyone is suffering. Any race, any kind of culture, we are all suffering. That is like the human condition that we have together is suffering. And so the idea is, despite that, how hard life can be, you need to hold yourself accountable to be the best actor you can be in the play that you've been provided.
Yeah,
we were all provided a play
because they have all these little tricks that they do to kind of get themselves in the right kind of mind frame, so that you can bear the suffering when it happens. There's like all these types of things. Some of the more softer ones are just a simple idea of like looking on the bright side. If something bad happens, try and see what good could have happened out of it. If you're suffering, try to see what kind of good is happening that you might not have realized because you're too busy, being down on yourself because you're suffering, right? There's always upshots. There's always silver linings. There's always downsides, but there's always pros and cons, right?
I have a friend that's gone through a decent amount of suffering in their life, and they're a very creative person. And, often they come to me talking about suffering and talking about like when will it end and why is it me and those kinds of things. And, it sucks. It sucks to watch a friend go through suffering. But when you're stoic, the response that I give them is, you're a very creative person, and creativity doesn't come from privilege and happiness. Creativity comes from suffering.
True.
The most beautiful works of art, music, movies, TV shows,
the most troubled minds
are from the most troubled minds. Exactly. Yeah. So I say to them, listen, suffering sucks, and it sucks that you had to go through so much of it. But perhaps this was the way it was meant to be. Perhaps you were meant to suffer in all these different ways so that you could have what it took to write that film or to write that song. But it does sound terrible, but it's also a beautiful thing as well. The idea
that it might seem like it's a mean thing, but it's not. It doesn't come from that kind of it doesn't come from that negative side that it might make it seem like it does.
No,
it's more just trying to make the best out of it, because what happened happened. It's not saying that what happened was good, but what happened merely is what happened. You got your part in your play and you played it, and now what? Right? That's kind of, it's not like,
how can you continue? Like, okay, you had your part in your play, you played it, and now you're suffering. Okay? How can you, through this suffering, how can you preserve yourself, and how can you get back to being the best actor that you can be? Right? And the answer to that, usually the answer to that is to find a way to see your suffering as a means to a greater end.
100%. Yep.
Which is very Machiavellian, right? The ends justify the means.
It's also
so it's like
too.
But like Machiavellian does borrow from the Stoics. I mean, he's later on in Italy, but they both have some links. But to say to yourself, I have struggled for so long with all these different things, and I'm so ready. I'm ready to give up. I'm ready to give up on my dreams. I'm ready for all these different things. Now imagine you're a stoic. Instead of being the person that was suffering and depressed and down on themselves, now imagine you're a stoic. And you know, life is a play. Everything happens for a reason. And everyone is meant to struggle. I just struggled for years because of this X problem, right? Now, as a stoic, I view that struggling as lessons and perhaps something that I can use in the future to avoid that struggling again and that suffering again, right? Like if I have a relationship that fails, for example, I will take all that heartache, I will cry it all out, and it hurts and I suffer. But through that, I also remember this suffering has meaning. It has taught me things. It has taught me how to manage my emotions. It has taught me what I want from someone. It has taught me, how to be a better person and how to avoid coming back to this situation again. And if that's how you see it, if you see it as I suffered and now how do I use this suffering to be a better actor in my play so that I can achieve the greater goal that I want to achieve, then you're always going to take your hits and you're going to bounce back. And the stoic bounces back stronger every single time. That's the point of stoicism.
It kind of sets you up in that way, right? It sets you up to be able to think critically and then bounce back and then take your opportunity when you get it. That's like really important too, right? It's like when you get your shot at not suffering, you take it, right? You know what I mean?
Take your way out and don't wallow in self-pity and don't get lost in hedonism.
Because then you might miss something that you would have otherwise thought of, right? Something like that. Right?
So now we have some quotes, right?
We have some quotes from Cicero, I think. I had some quotes from Cicero.
So right? Cicero is an ancient Roman scholar. I believe he was a historian.
Stoic, I believe. He was a politician.
A statesman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
you get definitely a statesman.
So let's hear some of the things that Cicero had to say. He is quoted as a Stoic, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, I think so. Yeah, you got one? Yeah.
Do you want to start with the one that you liked that I sent you?
Well, you've got. I think you got to read them because I can't.
I'll read it.
Well, hold up. Maybe I can read it. Actually, well, no, you should read the first one because I got to get it on my phone because I can't change the recording.
First one is, if we are not ashamed to think it, we should not be ashamed to say it. That's the first one.
So if we are not ashamed to think it, we should not be ashamed to say it.
Yeah, and then I'll let you explain them if you want.
Well, let's dive into that for a few minutes. If we are not ashamed to think it, okay. So is it okay to be shameful of the things that you think of?
Yes, he's not saying that's not the case.
No, I know. I'm asking you a question. Is it okay to be shameful? Now, if you think and this is I think where Cicero's going with this. If you think what you're thinking is right, what should you do?
You should make that public. Maybe not make it public, but you should say it.
You shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid to say it.
Saying it. I think that's more directly what he's saying.
Yeah, I think this is and this is why I said I love this lesson. Because I think it's very, very important, especially in today's current climate in the world, like politically and culturally. Because I think a lot of us have things that we are not ashamed to think about, things that we have in our own personal brains, issues that we see around us, but because of how grand the problem looks, we feel ashamed to even say these things that we're thinking. Because we see the world around us, it seems like everyone else is agreeing with the opposite side of what we're thinking. And what Cicero would tell you is, if you can go into your brain, and if you are not ashamed of that thought, if you believe in that thought strong enough, you should say it. And honestly, I think it makes you a better actor for saying it. You have to have that strength to say what you think. Because silence is violence in a certain way. I know that's been a very frequent thing that people have been saying. Silence is violence. There are many, many different ways that silence is violence. One of the major ways that silence is violence is this idea of the silent majority, right? Like now we have this massive like think about it in this example. Trump got 10 million more votes this election than last election. However, if you look at social media and the mainstream media, it seems like nobody likes Trump.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the violence that occurs when we don't follow Cicero's advice. All of us are, not all of us, a lot of people obviously in the US are ashamed to say that they might be Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. But because they're ashamed to talk about that, we no longer have conversation with them. So you have a system that only is catering to one side and only speaks to one side. You have another side that doesn't want to speak. So it's like, that is violent, because you need to have open discourse of ideas so that you can learn from one another.
The point is that if you weren't ashamed to think, like, if you think that way, it must be because you're not ashamed to think that way, right?
Yeah.
So then it necessarily makes it at least something that should be talked about, right? I think that's the idea.
So,
and Cicero comes from, I think, a place of like statesmanship and holding each other accountable. I think that's a lot of what Cicero is about. Like, he has this other quote, which is in Latin, and it translates to, "Not for ourselves alone are we born." Like, that's what he's trying to say there is pretty obvious, right? It's like, you aren't born just for yourself. You aren't born to just do the things that you want to do. You're also born to be a tool for the people, right?
Yes. You're an instrument. You're an instrument for a greater cause. And you have to find, and I believe in this because, I mean, I am religious. I believe that all of us are instruments for a greater cause. But it's not clear what that cause is. No one is going to come up to you and say, "Listen, dude, you're an instrument for this kind of cause. You need to go and do it." No one's going to tell you it. It's something you have to find within.
If tell me that, it'd be kind of weird.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. It'd be like, oh, okay.
I'd be like, okay, right. I might not listen to that one.
But the truth is, you are an instrument for a certain cause. There is something that each one of you can be fantastic at and is meant to do. And honestly, I think most people do not reach what they were meant to do. I don't believe that they do. Honestly, I don't think that most people reach what they're meant to do.
A lot of people do.
And I think it's because they don't believe in themselves. And I think it's because they don't have the lenses that are needed to evaluate and be self-aware. That's why I think that's the problem.
This is part of the reason why philosophy is so important, right?
Exactly.
It gives you like kind of the meaning that you're missing to complete
if life is a puzzle. Yeah, if life is a puzzle.
Yeah, we both had the same thought there, Karen.
If life is a puzzle and you have math and you have science and you have religion and you have, social studies, you're so close. And this is I think I'm going to get deep with this actually right now. When you have a puzzle like that and you have all those different things, you have culture, you have science, math, English, language, all those different things there. You have enough of the puzzle in front of you to know what the picture is. Right? So this is why it's so easy to forego philosophy.
Yes, that is deep, but I do like that.
Because you have enough of the puzzle in front of you to say, what do I need this last piece? I know that it's this.
I know what I'm looking at.
I know what I'm looking at.
I know what I'm looking at.
Why do I need the last piece?
A better version of yourself.
That one last little piece perfects you.
I would argue that that's true.
Not to say that you are perfect, but it perfects you. Right? Like,
I think everybody would, like myself included, because even though I've learned these things, sometimes it's easy to
you forget.
Not apply them, right? Yeah. You may forget, or you may just not want to, but I think everybody could benefit from a little more critical thinking and critical reason and rationality in their lives. I feel like that's
if you have that puzzle in front of you and you know what the image is, think about this, for example. Does it matter that you already know what the image is? Or does it instead matter that there is that one little piece left? Don't you want to finish it? Don't you want to figure out the rest of the puzzle? Or are you happy enough with the image that you have, right? And this is the idea of ignorance. And ignorance is bliss. It is bliss. And this is the idea of the cave allegory. It all works together in this tandem. Because
I could tell that it all connects in your brain.
It all connects in my brain. It really, really does. Because ignorance is bliss, which is why the people didn't want to leave the cave, right? Mm-hmm. And ignorance is bliss because it also leads to hedonism, and which is just like self-indulgence because you think you know everything, or you think that you know enough to stop. Okay? But the answer is you never know enough to stop, ever. I don't, you don't, Adam doesn't. Never. Your philosophy professors, Adam, at school, they don't know enough. Nope. Nobody knows enough.
They can seem like they do, but they also don't.
I'm sure that we seem pretty wise too. I know so little. I would like to know so much more. But I've got that last little piece in my puzzle. And that piece in that puzzle tells me some hard things. And this is why it's so easy to stay in the cave. Because the piece in the puzzle tells you, you know, you're so small. You're so small and insignificant. And that's really what it drives home.
You still have to be strong.
But you have to keep trying.
But yet you still have to be strong. You still have to question everything. You still have to do all of these due diligence, all of these huge due diligences within one very small, seemingly insignificant life, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem of philosophy.
And the interesting thing I find with a lot of philosophers is that they may be some of the most smartest people in the world, but they will always tell you that they are not smart enough, that there's always more that they could use. So many of them follow that same archetype. Almost every single one is like, it is a journey that never ends, right? However, if you talk to other people in different kinds of schools of thought or education systems or whatever, like a mathematician or a scientist, a lot of people will tell you like, no, like that's it. That's the truth and that's it. And I know it all. I know how it ends. That's how it ends. And that's the fact and that's the truth. Right? So it's like philosophy is one of the only fields where if you're looking for an answer, you're not going to find an answer. You're going to find a way to get there in your own head.
And you're going to find a whole ton of questions.
Oh, you're going to find more questions. You're going to get more questions than answers. You are going to get more questions than answers.
You'll have some answers. You'll have a lot more questions and you'll...
So we're coming close to an hour mark now. So we're going to move past Stoic. Is there any more Stoicism we want to talk about or no?
I think we touched upon it pretty good.
Okay, so then... Stoicism, life is a play, you're an actor, suffering is eternal, and all of us have it. Fight through suffering to be a better person.
That's a big snippet right there.
No, honestly.
Yeah, it's good. But you just said a lot of things. Yep.
Yeah.
We covered all of them previously.
Ignorance is bliss. There is a puzzle. You might know what the image is, but you might be missing that last piece. And and why is philosophy important? Because it's important to have the whole puzzle finished. Not because it'll provide you with answers, but because it'll provide you with the right questions.
Yeah, that's aptly put.
Okay, right. So now we move forward. And from Stoicism, we went more towards modern philosophy. And I think one of the ones that fucked with me and blew your mind, I think, too, was Baudrillard, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Baudrillard.
What was his name? Jean Baudrillard? I don't know. He's French. I don't know. Jean-Jacques, something like that. Someone with a J. J. Baudrillard. And he was...
talk about this one? This is kind of radical.
This is extremely radical.
Everyone get your radical...
I think we're going to have a whole episode to discuss the simulacrum.
Yeah, should we even get into it now?
I think I want to give a briefness to it because this is part of you and me's journey on why we find philosophy important, right? Like this kind of comes to the end of our journey now, like up to now.
This was
like
probably the most mind-blowing thing I ever learned in Mr. Hoff's class.
The allegory of the Mad Cartographer.
Oh, okay, yeah. You remember this one well, so I'll let you explain it. I actually don't really remember this, but I remember that it was important.
So one thing you'll find with philosophy is that it's always easier to explain things with a story. Because if I had to tell, unless you're well, if you're Kant, you just can't. You can't.
You cannot use stories.
Yeah. So the story of the Mad Cartographer is basically this: there exists a world around us, and we live in it, and we see it. There's trees, and there's towns, and there's whatever. There's grass, and there's sand, and there's signs, and the queen of the land, the queen that runs the entire land, hires a cartographer. And a cartographer, if you don't know, is just someone who makes maps. It's a maker of maps. The queen hires a cartographer to map out her realm. She wants a beautiful map made of her entire realm. And so the cartographer goes through the lands, and when he sees a tree, he draws a tree on the map. And when he sees a town, he draws a town on the map. And he goes and he makes a massive map trying to encompass everything that the realm had in it. He brings it back to the queen, and the queen says, "This is a beautiful map that you made of our lands. However, the map doesn't do my realm justice. My realm is so much bigger than this map. I need you to capture my realm perfectly, right?" So the cartographer goes back, and now what he does, instead of writing on a map, what he does is he rolls out map over the landscapes. He rolls out his map over the landscape, and he puts his map over the town. And then he writes on top of it, town. And he puts his map over the trees and the forests, and he writes on top of it, forest, right? So you understand now, the map is no longer something that he can show, but now the map is the ground that you walk on. The ground that you walk on is someone else's idea of what it really is. This is the best way of explaining the simulacrum. The simulacrum is this realm of existence that all of us live in. And Adam was right, because we're going to sound kind of crazy, actually. But That's
why I said to put our radical hats on. Don't actually do. Okay, go on.
I did it. I put a little hat on. You can't see. Adam can't see my video, but I put a hat on.
I heard the little.
Yeah. So, okay. So the simulacrum essentially is that it is the landscape with the map on top of it. It is the tree with the map over it and the writing tree, because in the simulacrum you have to believe what you see. So if you see on the map the tree is there, you're no longer able to rip open that map and look under it. That map exists on top of the tree. You can't look under it. You have to just believe that where the map says tree, there's a tree there. You have to believe it. And where the map says town, there's a town there.
Or when the map says stop sign, you have to stop there.
Yes, right? And because there's rules that come with it, right?
Signs are a part of the map, right? That's the way it was explained, at least for me, right?
So,
like, and not just the literal signs that we use, even like figurative signs too. But it's easy to explain it with like the stop sign example, right? Like, what makes you have to stop there? Well, the stop sign puts the idea in our heads that we're supposed to stop there, right?
Yeah.
But what's the reality of that idea, right?
Well, I think the best example so the stop sign is good. What Hoffman gave to us was the idea of the police officer. What gives a police officer power?
Go on.
What gives a police officer power?
The government.
Okay. What gives the government power?
Yeah. See, I don't know.
Okay. So the way that Hoffman put it was this: like, what gives the policeman power? Well, it's like a piece of paper. It's a badge, let's say, right?
Yeah.
What gives the symbol of the badge power? Well, it's the government and its legislation that allows for police officers. Okay. And what gives those people power? And it's like, us, right? Sort of, right? And it's like, well, then what? So then, what gives us power? The virtue of being born, right? Who knows? So then, what gives a cop power? A badge that traces to the government, that traces to us, that traces to nothing. So a badge means nothing.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's like what the simulacrum is that we have been conditioned. You have to understand that we have been conditioned to assign value to a badge, right? Because we were told to. Because talk.
And like what you come to realize is it's not just the case with badges. It's the case with everything.
Everything. Yeah, it's everything.
Right. And the whole argument comes down to the fact that we no longer live in, this signless world that we used to live in back when we would, be hunters and gatherers, right? Back then, if you saw, an animal, you knew why the animal was powerful, right? Because the animal was a source of food for you, right?
Yeah.
That was the animal's power. It was obvious and everything's apparent. And you see someone else and if they're not a part of your tribe, you see danger, right? And it was obvious why they were dangerous because you didn't know them and because, tribes got into fights or whatever. I'm not really explaining it very well, but if you saw a bush with berries on it, you knew why that was something that was good, because now you could tell your whole tribe, and now you had a source of food that was readily available, right?
Yeah.
Everything was apparent, right?
Yeah.
The difference here is that you can explain, like, it's not like the case with the badge where you cannot explain why that's powerful. You can explain why these things in a sort of pre-world that people used to live in, we can easily explain why all of these things are valuable, right?
Yeah.
Why?
So that
How is money valuable?
money,
Is money valuable in the same way that a berry bush is valuable? No, a berry bush is valuable in a whole different way than money is valuable.
yeah.
We can't even explain why money is valuable, right?
Half of us,
That's the
more
idea
than
of
half of us,
simulacrum.
don't even understand like why money's important or like how it's important or how it even makes any sense. Because if it's not based on gold, what is it based on? Nothing.
It's based on nothing. It's based on air. It's like
It's based on
all air,
something
right?
that economists know that we don't.
And this is mostly what Baudrillard was talking about, right? It's just a lot of what we think is real is just air.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's air to make things easier,
And it does make things easier.
but it also makes things less real.
True.
That's and that's the takeaway, and that's the compromise that you have to make, is that the simulacrum makes things more palatable. It makes things easier. It allows you to make sense of something that shouldn't actually make any sense, right? So if you just believe blindly in the simulacrum, life makes sense. Life is like the cave, the flames against the wall.
I think that's kind of where it came from, yeah.
Exactly. Life is like the flames against the wall. It makes sense. It's all you know, and you shouldn't question it, right? But is there something else? Is there something behind that cave? Is there something beyond it, right? Is there something underneath that map?
And what you'll come to realize is a lot of it is just our imagination thinking that things are real.
Yeah, it's fabricated. Like it's because it's more. It's
I don't want to use
easier.
the harsh word as delusion, but a lot of it is like we are kind of delusional. In a
It's
way.
easier to be delusional than it is to know the truth.
Because the truth involves going into a forest and like scavenging and
even simpler than that. Even simpler than
who
that.
wants to do that, right?
No, even simpler than that. It's easier to be delusional than it is to know the truth, because the truth, you can only get to the truth by questioning the most fundamental things about everything around you. That's the only way you find truth. If you have to question every fundamental thing around you. Why does a badge have power? Why,
does money have power?
Why is money valuable over food? Don't we need food? We don't need money, but we need food, right? These are all these different things. And the simulacrum tries to boil it down to this is kind of a simulated version of what the real reality is, and it is that way.
Exactly. It tries to tell you that it simply is the way it is.
Yeah, and it is the way it is because it's easier.
Because it is.
Because it is, and because it's easier, and because someone set it up that way long ago.
On it. We as a collective unit had agreed on it.
Yeah, somebody maybe too vague and maybe too.
It was a slow process. It wasn't just one person. It was gradual, and people obviously don't like living in the wilderness where even though things are real there. I'm not trying to say that that's a better life.
Yeah,
that's definitely not what I'm saying. Don't misunderstand.
The end of the story of the Mad Cartographer, and we're going to leave it here because I think our next episode we might get into some crazier stuff, like some some more specific. Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, if not, we'll figure something out.
I honestly know what we're going to do next time, but we can.
No, we don't.
Yeah, we can talk about
this
that.
Is fly by night, but this is fly by night. Honestly, we just kind of go live.
Very prepared. We were
very prepared. But basically, the Mad Cartographer's tale doesn't end ever, because the queen is replaced by a king, and the king is replaced by a government, and the government is replaced by a dictator, and the dictator is replaced by a religious leader, a pope,
etc.
The people are always changing, and as those heads of states always change, they want a new map. They want a new map the way that they want to see the map. That's the important thing. It says, okay, the queen before me, you made a map for the queen before me, and you mapped over the entire land the way she. Oh, my Google went off. That's actually really freaky. My Google Home just went off, and literally interrupted me.
It's okay.
Very weird. But regardless, you made this whole map covering over all this land in the queen's eye of it, right? But now you have the king. The king sees it a different way. So now you have to make a brand new map over the reality, right? And then the king turns to the pope, and the pope says, that king's map was stupid. It's out of date. It's not right. So now you have to make a new map for the pope's map over the king's map, over the queen's map, over your map, over reality.
And the point is, what?
What's the point? The point is that there are so many maps over each other now that it is nearly impossible to see to the base.
Yes. I think that's definitely true.
Is that what you were going to say?
Born into it. You're kind of born into it, and you don't have a way of tracing it.
No.
Like, there's no way. At this point, there's just piles of maps on each other, and they're all mixed up. We just have no idea.
This is why it relates so well to the cave allegory, is because imagine like this. Like, imagine now, okay, we are born, like Adam and I are born in the 90s. We were born in the 90s. There existed a map over a map, 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 over a map. But we were born on the 90s map, let's say. Like, if
90s kids.
I'm being like really like vague, but we were born on that map, right? So all of our experiences happened on that map and that understanding of reality.
Yeah, right? I think this is very important. Yeah, I see where you're going now. I just got it. Keep going.
So the next generation will be born on a new map, and the one before us was born on a different map as well. So the maps are always changing, right? And therefore the generations that are born onto these maps are always going to see a different thing around them. So it becomes very difficult. Yeah, go ahead. I think you have something
gold.
Also,
another point that you're missing is that
let's hear it.
This is why people who are older, this is why people who were born in different eras perceive the world as changing in a negative direction. They all see the world as it's changing for the worse, right? But what's actually happening is that it's just merely changing as it always does. And because you're born into a certain world, you expect, if you don't use this critical thinking and this philosophy, you expect that world to be the same world later. When in reality, there is no reason for that to be the case, right?
Yeah. You expect that the world that you were born into, the map that you were born onto, is the map for the rest of the trajectory of your life, and potentially for all life that comes after that, because you're probably going to treat your kids as being on your map and on your understanding of the world around you, whereas your kids are going to have a totally different map that they're born onto, and they're going to have a totally different understanding of reality, because it will be different. The symbols will be potentially the same, but things will be different, right? And so the idea is this: you have no power over where you were born and when you were born, but you do have power over whether you are willing to see past or see through. And if you're willing to see through, Baudrillard's your guy. And if any of this crazy rambling makes any sense to you at all,
I hope it does.
Because this last probably 20 minutes was a bit crazy, because Baudrillard gets kind of crazy, and I swear to you,
over in 20 minutes. It should actually be like
a 3-4 hours. Yeah.
To explain it. Yeah.
And we also weren't completely prepared to talk about Baudrillard either.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to talk about this, honestly.
I wanted to get into it a little bit because it was important for us. But if this makes any sense to you, I suggest that you do look into Jean Baudrillard. I think it's Jean Baudrillard.
I think it's John, yeah.
French philosopher. And we'll end it with this. We'll end it with the end of our tale of Mr. Hoffman. We graduated, and I think when I graduated, I told you, Adam, to also take Hoffman's class.
And the funny thing about that class for me was that I was like, I was almost failing calculus. I was almost failing physics. I was like, okay, I don't have time to study for philosophy. I'm just going to listen in class, take notes, and then whatever I get on all the tests is what I get. I have other things to focus on, right? And it ended up that philosophy was like my highest mark by far. And it's just kind of interesting. But because even though I was trying harder to learn other things, like what really stuck with me was the philosophy, and that's what I would find myself thinking about. Like, oh, Hoffman said this is a crazy thought, and I would like try and dissect it for a few hours.
Yeah,
and I feel like everyone needs that little bit of something to chew on every now and again. I think that's very important. Like it certainly gave my life purpose for a little while. I was like, what am I gonna learn today? Like, like what crazy idea am I gonna digest today, right? I was always thinking that, and it was fun. It's part of the
and it's
reason why I
hard.
ended up pursuing this.
It's not easy to like.
It's not easy.
It's not easy to read philosophy because it's like very difficult to read. It's also not easy to follow philosophy. Like once you know it, now you have to follow it, and it's like that's really difficult. Like on an average day, I'm not a good Stoic, even though I think that I am a Stoic. I'm not a good one most days.
I tried, but
you know, Adam probably tries too, but I'm sure he fails. Like it's hard to follow philosophy. It's meant to be that way. I think we're all meant to fail too.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that from what you get from this is you get that there is more than meets the eye. And if you're willing to know what it is that is more than meets the eye, there are people that you can read. Plato and Socrates.
And there's some crazy ideas that you'll find.
There's plenty. But if you want to hear...
able to understand way more than you thought you may have been able to.
Yeah.
It's actually way more accessible than you think.
It is. It really is. And if you go through it through like kind of the beginning to the end, like if you go through it through like reading Plato and then reading like a book from a Stoic, like or was it Marcus Aurelius, I think? And then you go into something like Kant or you know, you finish up with Nietzsche. Yeah. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine. Like there are so many people you can read from, and so many of these people have a couple good lessons. And honestly, if you find a textbook that'll teach you, I'm sure you can find YouTube videos that'll help unpack these things and teach them to you in a lecture kind of format. I think like there's a philosophy channel that like breaks down most philosophers in like 5 minutes. It does a pretty good job of it too.
Yeah, School of Life, I think, is the one that you're talking about.
School of Life, yeah, I think so too. So it's like
there's also even a crash course philosophy now, just like there's a crash course in everything else.
The most important thing, I think, in my opinion, is to leave you with a desire to want to ask more questions, and perhaps a desire to want to make more sense of the world around you.
Yep.
Now, before we cut this off, can you hear the music in the background, Adam?
Yes.
Of my microphone? Yeah. So for some reason, Google put on like a gospel channel at the end, like while I was randomly. I don't know why it did that, but that's what it did. So thank you for listening to.
It was audible, but I hope it's okay.
And whatever. Thank you for listening to the second episode of the Bruni Brocast. Why is philosophy important? Hopefully you agree with us. You can send us messages anywhere you'd like. We now have an Instagram, Bruni Bro TV on Instagram. We also have a TikTok, Bruni Bro TV on TikTok, where I have some other content that I make, and hopefully Adam's gonna start making some stuff too.
Some cool content there. Hopefully I'll be able to make some soon. But yeah, you have some really cool stuff there.
So hopefully you guys will find us maybe after exams before Christmas.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Take care.
We'll catch you later.